Yeah, that's the question we're trying to answer this afternoon here on eNCA. Do we really need a state bank? I suppose you could start asking the question, what does a state bank actually do? Well, the governing ANC is pushing ahead with this idea to create one. In fact, if you're wondering where it came from, here it is. This past weekend, Secretary General Fikile Mbalula tweeted that government should work quickly to implement resolutions for a state bank. Now it's gone one step further. The NCOP, National Council of Provinces, is considering amending the South African Postbank Limited Act. Now, this means the South African Post Office, the sole owner and shareholder of Postbank, could pave the way for a state bank. That's all quite complicated. We're going to try and stay away from that for now. I want to try and get to the bottom of whether this is actually a good idea. Let's bring into the conversation both economist Dawie Roodt and governance expert Harlan Cloete. Good afternoon to both of you. One in Pretoria, one in the bustling metropolis of Bloemfontein this afternoon. Harlan, I'll come to you in a moment. Dawie Roodt, let me start with you first. Let's talk money, shall we? Can this be done? Is it a good idea? Is this going to make money or lose money for us as a country?
I'm pretty sure it's going to lose money, but let's just understand what it means to have a bank. And I think there are different people's got perhaps different views on what a bank is. But essentially what a bank is, it can house a payment system. In other words, if I want to pay you or make a transfer to your bank account as an example, or if I want to withdraw money, for example, you need a payment system. And in fact, there are many examples of payment systems. The banks in South Africa, they all have payment systems in one way or the other. And in fact, I can even go to places like, for example, Pick n Pay, and I can withdraw my SASSA money there as an example. So we don't really need a bank for that. That's well established in South Africa. And there are many apps and various things that you can use to pay people, for example. The second reason why you may want a bank is to make deposits, somewhere you can put your money, save your money as an example. The Postbank, in fact, you can do it there. You don't need a state bank to do that. But I think when you talk about banking, people usually think it's a place where you can go and borrow money. And I think that's the crucial thing. So people want to go somewhere where they can borrow money to buy a car, to buy a house, or whatever the case might be. And I would guess that is the rationale behind the ANC trying to push for a state bank to get poor people to get access to credit to buy things like, for example, houses and motor cars and so on. And that is the really risky part for that. And if you do create a state bank to lend money to poor people that can't get money from normal banks, as an example, then we're talking about the potential of this bank losing big money. And of course, it will be eventually for the pocket of the taxpayer.
Yeah, of course it is, because as you talk, Dawie, I just have flashbacks to having interviews with the South African Post Office as well, when all these great ideas were there. Access to financial sort of information and financial services didn't go well for them. But this may or may not be a different story. We'll come back to you, Dawie, on that in a moment. Harlan Cloete, hello to you in Bloemfontein. Governance-wise, good idea, bad idea?
I think, if you look, I think we have a crisis of confidence in state institutions. If you look at what has happened in all sectors where the state, if you look at the state-owned enterprises, we have a governance and leadership problem with these institutions. And, this idea of a state bank, although it may be very noble, the crisis of confidence is in governance and leadership. Is that the state does not have a good track record when it comes to managing these institutions. And I think that raises a red flag. I think also that we are dealing with symptoms. South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. And so one must probably go back and ask, but now why is there a need for a state bank? What is it that the current banks are they not doing? And why should we now have a need for another bank? And so those are the answers that we do not yet have. But I would think that the ANC is trying to, this also being a pre-election year, is pulling out all stops to prove to the electorate that they are seen to be doing something to alleviate the plight of the poor. Because the majority of the people in our country, unfortunately, they are poor.
Dawie, I could hear you nodding. From here as well. You agree with Harlan? You want to expand on that, take this in a different direction? Because let's be honest, we look at any state-owned entity and I'm afraid it's difficult to go find a good headline about it. You have to go to page 65 of Google to find a good headline about an SOE. But I could hear you nodding in the background, Dawie.
Yeah, I think you made a very excellent point there. And that is that there is an election around the corner, so expect the politicians to start promising us the state and the moon, on the sun and the moon and the stars. And of course, I don't think this is going to become a reality, a state bank, very soon. But we have a number of state banks in South Africa. You mentioned the Post Office Bank as an example. That is one. The Land Bank is basically a state bank. That is a bank where you can borrow money for specific things, for investing in agriculture, as an example. But the Land Bank hasn't been well managed recently. And we've got a couple of other banks as well, like, for example, the Developmental Bank, or the Development Bank. And that's also not a bank where you can go and borrow money. So, and again, coming back to my first point that I made, is that people, when you talk about bank, people usually think this is a place where you can go and borrow money cheaply and you can buy a house or whatever the case might be. But I am very sorry to say, is that the credit criteria of the state bank, if that is the objective of government, to lend money to poor people that probably won't be able, or many of them will not be able to repay their debts, simply means that this will be another state institution that is going to fail. But I think the point about politics, that's an excellent one, and I absolutely agree with that one.
So then, Harlan, as Dawie is saying, you're making an excellent point on the politics. I mean, do you think practically something like this could work? Because we had this discussion, or we heard from the president earlier in the year, the State of the Nation address. We've just been having it now with Fikile Mbalula off the back of his trip to China. And I imagine that's where the inspiration of this has come from. The Chinese banking system, the ANC thinks that's a great idea. Let's just transplant that here in South Africa, press go, and hopefully it all works. Could we work a system like the Chinese banking and financial sectors?
I don't think it's as simple as that. You know, we have a completely different context. But remember, we have got a Ministry of Small Business. And we have ministries that's supposed to be looking at small business. Now, why is it that they are not coming up with innovative solutions in partnership with the private sector to solve these complex problems? No, it is not as easy, like you say. You know, we go to China, we see what works, and we think it can work here. I think we must look at what we currently have and try and make that work instead of hopping onto something else. In this country, we also do not have a shortage of policies. It's at the implementation level. That is where the crux of our problems lie. And so we need to go back to these ministries and see what is it that they are doing. We've got the DTI, Ibrahim Patel is a minister, etc. What is it that is not working? Now, if we go to the root cause, you know, it's at the implementation level. It's a combination of factors. But the government should resist the temptation to deal with symptoms and look at the root cause of what is the actual problem. Yes, poor people have got struggling to get access to finance to get their businesses going. So what must we do? We've got the institution of NEDLAC, where government, business, labor, and community sit together. You know, this needs to be thrashed out there. And over the years, if you look at NEDLAC, a number of policies, a number of positions came out of there, but it's at the implementation. The figures show. Last year, the World Bank reported South Africa is now the most unequal country in the world.
Harlan, I'm going to stop you there very quickly. I'll tell you why. Harlan and Dawie, forgive me, I'm sure you know what it's like. You've both been in broadcasting long enough, the both of you. I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind just staying on the line.